Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
So the talk today is healing. It's personal. I didn't mean personal to me, it's personal to every one of us. That what healing is going to look like as each and every one of us is going to be different. So I invite you as we go through the service today is to think about something in your life that you're wanting healing. I don't want to say is there, because there's always something to go deeper in. So I just invite you to just connect with yourself, something that you would like healing, to feel or experience a greater healing. What is healing? Healing is when we reconnect with the wholeness and the presence that is always here. So the principle is that behind all appearances, behind each and every one of us, beyond the entire material world, behind it, behind the appearances, is this absolute unchanging wholeness, perfection, where there's no opposites, where it doesn't come and go, it's solid. So behind all human appearances is this one power and one presence. Behind all human appearances, there's this one power and one presence. And it is whole. And what that means is it has everything it needs all of the time. So it means that if you're going through challenges in your life, work challenges, relationship challenges, health challenges, money challenges, what's happening in the world, being a citizen of the world, whatever those challenges are, behind those challenges is the wholeness, and none of those challenges, no matter how intense, no matter how hard, can ever, ever, ever take away from the wholeness, ever. And it also means when we have good things that happen to us, we have great love in our life, we have great jobs, we just manifested a house, or we manifested the perfect working life, or we are fulfilling our dreams, and there's just all this incredible joy, woohoo. We're not adding on to the wholeness. That wholeness already existed. It's a human experience. This human experience is relative from the challenges to the light, but all of that is happening inside this always already wholeness that exists right now in this moment. Right now. There's nothing, when you go behind the appearances of your human life, that's a lot of meditation is about, withdrawing your attention from the senses, because that keeps us very focused on this mercurial relative world, and pull it back into this absolute unchanging essence of who and what we are and who and what all life is, and is beyond all of that. We start to feel a wholeness that already exists, and that's here right now. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to prove anything to connect with that wholeness. It's right here, right now, and it's going to be for the rest of your life on this earth into all existence. That is a powerful knowing. That is a healing knowing. So what healing is reconnecting with that always already wholeness. It's very simple. Ernest Holmes said, there's nothing to be healed, only God to be revealed. That's just another way of saying, when we return to that wholeness, everything is fine. So we're all healers. There's no special trick here. All it means is putting our attention not on the world of appearances, but pulling our attention, our awareness back to this absolute wholeness. And every time we do that, we are creating healing. That everything that needs to be healed, you know what that is? I know you all know this, is separation. That's the one thing that we are all healing. So when things go badly, or things the way we don't want it to go, the healing that we need is to think that we're separate from that wholeness. Nothing will ever separate us from that wholeness. And the healing that needs to happen is to believe, I'm separated. I'm no longer part. I'm never whole. I have to fix this situation out here. I have to do this, and then I'll be whole. That's the misguidedness. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to fix your finances, your relationships, your emotional, mental self. in order to know the wholeness, all you have to do is be rigorous about knowing that wholeness. As a community, we've been slowly working our way through the Bhagavad Gita, and this week was chapter 6, and chapter 6 was about meditation. We were talking about action, selfless action earlier, but it says all of it is not worth it if you're not spending rigorous time, intense, intentional time with this wholeness. It doesn't just happen. So I'm saying it's just here, all you have to do it, it's easy peasy. And what chapter 6 is saying is, actually it's not. You have to really work at it. This takes effort like anything else, and it goes deeper and deeper. And it's like, if you're an artist, there's levels. You keep working at it, you get better and better. If you're anything that you do, you work out, cook, whatever you like to do, the more you do it, the better it gets, the more real it becomes. Well, that is this wholeness and this perfection. And so I love that reading today by Michael Beckwith, because he said, why would you not want to take very seriously the fact that that presence, this wholeness that decided to birth itself as each and every one of you, it wants to birth you. And if it birthed you, don't you think it's going to be intensely interested in your life? It's going to care profoundly because it's the one that birthed you. And what it also wants is us to be intensely interested in it. Joel Goldsmith said, there's one power and one presence, but where it goes unrecognized, it's like it doesn't even exist. Of course, it always exists, but if we're not paying attention to it, if we're not conscious of it, if we're not constantly, with water, they're constantly telling you, drink water. You have to, all day, it's for your health. It's that. How hydrated are you in God? Are you constantly taking little sips and dips into that divine presence of wholeness? Because that's the only place where healing really happens. This past week, Jerry Bowen, our beloved Jerry Bowen, she was having some coughing and lung issues, and I got her permission to talk about this. And so she had to go into the hospital because her oxygen levels got really low. And they came in and through they were giving different tests, and they gave her a diagnosis. She did not agree with that diagnosis. But what I appreciated when I was talking with her, I said, well, has your son come to visit you? And this is when she was in the hospital, or I was worried that she was on her own. She goes, no, I don't want visitors. She says, first of all, there's a lot of medical people coming in and out, but when they're not here, I don't turn on the TV, I don't want to talk to people, I just want to be with my God. It takes work, it takes intention, and it takes time to just be still. And Michael also mentions the aloneness. It's the alone seeking the alone, as Plotinus said, that aloneness in God. But it's a lover. It's not sad. It's your eternal lover. And anyone who's heard Jerry talk about God is her eternal lover, for sure. So when she's at this point in her life, this experience in the hospital, where does she go? To her eternal lover. That's who she wants to spend her time with. That's extraordinary to me. When we had this conversation, and then I don't know how long after that, we get a text, the prayer team gets a text. Oh yeah, the doctors came in and said I don't have the diagnosis that they gave me. So she went home. She's still healing. Because that wholeness and that oneness has its own journey for each and every one of us. And that's what we have to remember about the uniqueness of this. That we, each and every one of us, have our own journey. I can always tell people, my colleagues and ministers who've worked in a hospital, because we're not absolutist about anything. Because when you're in a hospital, you have all sorts of, everybody responds differently when you're working with people. And it's none of my business what people's journey is. I'm there to love people right where they are. This is back in the past when I was working in a psychiatric hospital. I still needed to know their diagnosis, but I was always practicing not just the wholeness of each patient. And I'm just saying this because we're all healers, and it's happening now. You don't have to work in a hospital. It was so very intentional. It was with the administration. It was with the maintenance folks. It was with the doctors and the nurses. It was seeing that wholeness in everyone, in every situation, as much as humanly possible. And that's what we're all doing here. That's why we're here. I see a room full of healers. And we are just constantly choosing to be that for our friends, for our family, for our community, for our nation, and for this world. We acknowledge what's happening in the world. We don't pretend it's not happening, but we continually return to the absolute truth, because nothing can ever change that. We are unwavering in holding that wholeness. Nothing will ever change that. That wholeness is for all eternity. So what a gift that we get to hold this for our friends and our family, for community in the world. What a gift that we get to hold it for ourselves. I asked you if you had some place that you wanted healing. What if you just continue to hold wholeness in that place? It's already there. Everything, that wholeness is already there. And one of the things our teaching also does, the Science of Mind teaching does, is talk about the power of mind. And the mind is so powerful. But they're slightly different. And I want to share what the difference is, but also how important it is that they work together. So often in what we teach, CSL teaches, New Thought teaches, when you have an issue, you go, well, what's the quality that's going to help that issue? So if you have financial issues, you work with abundance or prosperity. If health issues, you work with health. Relationship issues, you work with love, and all sorts of relationships have so many myriads of things, and work life, creative expression, dreams. So we're always looking, well, what's the quality that fits that? And that's the mental work that we're doing. Because that's I have to think about it. I have to say, okay, these are the qualities, and it's almost like we're specialized. You know, the doctors who come in and say, okay, I'm specialized in just this area of the body, and I'm going to focus in. So I have a money issue. I'm just going to focus in on money, and it works. But sometimes, and I've read this enough times. First, I read it in Goldsmith, and I read it in Rilber, that these healings are often temporary, or they shift around a lot, because they're coming from the human mind as a healer, not our conscious mind, our subconscious mind. Science of Mind works a lot with the subconscious mind, to give you a sense of how powerful the subconscious mind is. I saw a documentary. What was it called? It was, I don't know, 20 years ago. It was called Shortcut to Nirvana. Anyone ever heard of that? Not the band Nirvana. Shortcut to Nirvana. It's about, I wrote it down. There's a festival that happens in India. You may know better than, some of you may know better than me. In India, called the Kumbh Mela. It happens every 12 years. It attracts millions of people. It happened in 2025, and 660 million people showed up. So it's a big festival. And it's about, and so the documentary, and there's a few of them, but this is the one I happened to see. It was of all these spiritual people doing crazy stuff, lying on nails, women stop, because this is what India, the Hinduism is really teaching you, how to control your body, how to learn how to breath works, how to pull your attention away from your nerves so things don't bother you anymore. You don't feel hot or cold. So you have someone lying on nails. I was totally mesmerized by this woman who not only stopped her breath, but then was buried underground for like 3 days, and then they unburied her, and she was fine. And I remember when I first started hearing this stuff back in the early 90s, I was like, no way. They're doing, because, magicians, they do crazy stuff. I'm like, this is just magic. But the more I've been on this path, I'm like, oh no, this is, I think there's some people who are playing, but they're people, this stuff is real. That we have so much power in our consciousness. You look at David Blaine, a magician, but he has mastered these states of consciousness. And what it shows is how extraordinarily powerful the subconscious mind is, and how much, when we learn how it works and we do the work, just like knowing the wholeness and the presence of God, you do the work to master that subconscious mind and use it in the way that you want, you can do crazy things. I mean, I just remember, well, I won't even go into the details because it's so gross, but one person, what they were doing with their body, they were just, and they're not like, this isn't performative, there's 660 million, they're just sitting under a tree doing these crazy things to their body, and I'm like, ouch! I can't even imagine. And I just think of I've always thought that with Jesus and the crucifixion, there's like, oh, he must have been suffering. But I'm thinking if these guys cannot feel pain, maybe he could just sort of pull his consciousness away and didn't have to feel everything that we think he felt. Anyway, it teaches the power of the mind. And when I turned off I skimmed a lot of it because it was interesting, it was amazing, but it didn't open my heart. I still felt the vibration, so when I turned it off, I was still feeling the vibration of everything I watched. You can't watch these millions of people and all this stuff happening without feeling that extraordinary vibration. But it's not God. It's this mastery of that middle level, the subconscious level. And so the power comes when we use the power of our mind to connect with the wholeness and perfection that already exists. We use the power of our mind not just to get what we want, because we know we can do that. I've definitely proved that to myself many times. If I don't even have to think about God. I can say, I want to, and I just use the techniques that I've used, and I can get that. But it can be completely separate from this divine wholeness. And what we are doing as healers is we want to be part of the divine wholeness. And that requires some humility. So the power of mind can say, this is what I want. We can ask. In fact, we're often invited in all these different traditions. Ask. A lot of these things don't happen unless you ask. You can declare. The declaring, I always thought treatment was the first time I'd ever really heard declarative prayer, and then I realized there's a whole tradition of declarative prayer. This is what is true, I know it's true, and we speak the truth. We do all of those techniques, but as you know, in treatment, the last thing we do is we let it go. That letting go is key, because what we're saying is, this is what I want, I'm asking for what I want. Remember, the author authored us, it loves us, it wants to hear what we want. It wants to hear those. When you have a child and I want this, or or a declarative statement, I must, you care, you are interested. You might not have thought of giving that to your child, but when they ask, that gives you a time to just be with, okay, maybe, but the adult is seeing the big picture, where the child is only seeing the little picture. That's the surrender. Ramana Maharshi always said that most people cannot surrender all their life at once. It's too much. It's too much trust in something that you can't see. It's too much trust to say, okay, I give up, I don't have, and by the way, you don't want to give up either. So you need the participation. I don't even want to say the asking and the declaring is optional. I would say it's essential. Because participation in your healing is key. To be in engagement with this wholeness is engagement. It's not passivity. It's not like, okay, whatever you want, and I'm not participating, because it's very hard for spirit to move through someone who's not participating in their own healing. So you're participating, but you're humble. You're listening. Because sometimes what happens, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this, the things that happen are not something you would have asked for. That wasn't really what I had in mind, right? Have you ever had that experience? Like you want something and you get something different, or things show up in your life that you didn't necessarily want in your life. If we get so focused on the material world, like, well, if I don't get what I want, I'm going to be miserable, then there's no healing, because now I'm outside of wholeness. What starts to show up in our life is part of the wholeness. I remember I was telling a friend, this is when I was at Agape, and I was upset about the way something was. And but it's absolutely supposed to be that way, because that's what happened. You can wish other things happen, but that's what happened. That's now part of the wholeness. That's now part of the perfection. Embrace it. Embrace all of it. Do you see how different that is, how healing that is? Where you're not like, well, this didn't happen the way I wanted it to. Forget that. And you're fighting it all the time or trying to change it all the time. That there is the warrior self of knowing the truth, and from knowing that truth, if that will either disappear, but when it doesn't disappear, you keep knowing the truth until the gift of that experience comes forth. I heard this great equation, because Buddha said life is suffering, that there's just suffering everywhere. There's perfection happening everywhere all the time, and there's suffering happening everywhere all the time. And it's just underneath. You can just feel it sometimes, and sometimes it comes up. And he said, despair is suffering without meaning. So the equation is, or suffering without meaning leads to despair. And he gets that from Viktor Frankl, who noticed when he was in the Nazi concentration camps, the people who were doing well were the people who started finding their own meaning to what they were going through. They didn't create the concentration camps. That was not part of their consciousness, that they deserved to be in this atrocious, torturous, horrific experience, tearing their hearts apart with families and brutality. They did not choose that. They did not make that happen. But the ones who worked hard to find a meaning for themselves in it ended up doing so much better in the camps than the people who just fell off into the ground and said this into total despair. There was no meaning to it. It's just pure pain for absolutely no reason. And then they tend to fade away. Our meaning is to return to wholeness no matter what. There are so many stories of spiritual people who get put in prison or terrible things happen, but they keep putting their attention on the wholeness, and we start to discover, oh, look it, as bad as that situation is, they're not falling apart. They're still finding, miraculously, love in the midst of hell. They're even finding moments of incredible, precious joy in the midst of hell. The healing is always, always, always returning to this oneness, to the wholeness. And that's available to every one of us all of the time, every day, in every situation. And it's up to us, as we are encouraged in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita, to do that practice. Arjuna asks Krishna in that chapter, well, what happens if I fail? What if I'm trying to do the spiritual stuff and I don't fail? And he said, you never fail. This is not a pass-fail thing. Everybody passes. You just keep trying. And you go to the other side of the veil, you just keep trying on the other side of the veil. You never stop, because you will pass. Everybody passes. Nobody's left out in the cold. And our job is to do what we can for ourselves so we can help others so they're not left out in the cold. Healing is personal. So the other thing that can happen in healing is, okay, so now I'm in the wholeness. So for instance, when I worked in the hospital, I was constantly working and seeing wholeness in everybody, and I would see their diagnosis, and so it's that simultaneous awareness, seeing the human experience, but also the wholeness. And I loved working there. I knew I was working for God. I knew God was my boss. I knew that God was everywhere in that hospital, and I was practicing it, but I used to get some people who would be upset with me, some of the patients, because I wasn't sad enough, or you're too cheerful to be working here, and I understand that. Probably should have toned it down a little bit, but I just love being for God, right, son? So what do we do with our humanity when it's us? I just was saying, if you have meaning, you can go through Auschwitz and, know the wholeness, and you're fine. Find your own meaning in that wholeness, and it's fine, as if we're robots. What do we do when it's personal? When it's your life or the person you love life? And so I'm going to talk about Jack a little bit, because it's gotten more personal. When I was in the hospital, they were patients. I loved them, but there was some distance. So the Bhagavad Gita is constantly talking about be detached, be detached. But when it's someone really close to you, it's really hard to get to that detachment. I can hold the wholeness, but boy, it doesn't stop those emotions from coming. Right? You know that, right? And so what we start learning is that those emotions are part of the wholeness. Those emotions and the sadness or the fear or the pain or whatever that is part of the perfection. It's not getting in the way of the wholeness. It's an expression. The way I look at it is there's a wholeness. It's a huge, big puzzle we don't see. And those incredibly intense emotions where it's personal, those are pieces of the puzzle, and we have to feel them. Otherwise, those pieces never get put in the puzzle. So we have to feel them, but to remember they're still only pieces. They're not the whole picture. So we can feel intensely, but it's not the whole picture. I don't think I fully realized until last night about how much I felt about this being Jack's service. I was up all night last night. I barely slept because it was so intense. And today it's like subsided a little because I felt it. And I will continue to feel. I know you all know this. I'm telling you what you already know. You feel those feelings, and we allow ourselves to feel them because there's always that wholeness that's holding us and caring for us and walking with us. That consciousness that we're never alone. What I realized was that Jack and I, I think most of you know, my last service is July 26th, and it was going to be Jack's last service as well, and we were going to end together, and I just had this picture of what, first of all, it was always in the future, so I didn't think about it, and this came up so suddenly, I didn't really process, we started this center together. We've gone this journey together, and not only that, the way I met Jack was he played my very first service as a minister. So we've gone through my whole journey as a pulpit minister. He's been by my side every step of the way, and it was going to change anyways. I'm going off to be a chaplain, so we both knew it was coming to an end, and we've talked about feeling sad about this part of our lives of always doing ministry. We still want to go on the road. We're still going to go on the road. But this of working in a church and having this teamwork thing is coming to an end. It just came to an end much quicker than I expected, than we expected. And it hurts, and it feels sad. And I feel grateful. I feel grateful that I feel sad because it's something to treasure and to care about. And I think you all know that. When you feel really sad about something, it's because you've loved it so much and you're so grateful for it. And beyond grateful, And so we practice the wholeness even now. We practice knowing that the pain is part of the wholeness. And it's beautiful. And then we return and let that wholeness carry us into whatever is happening in our future. You are all healers. You're healers today in this very moment. I know that you're being a healing consciousness for Jack and I today, but it's not just about Jack and I, it's about all of you and the people in your lives and your own life and the people you reach out to and receive from. I didn't know Jack was going to say that about receiving, and he always used to talk about how hard people would say, I'm giving this to you, and be like, yeah, mm-hmm, he just, like the idea of receiving, and so just the opening up and learning how to receive. We're teaching each other how to receive love, to give love, because to me, that's the purpose of this wholeness, is to learn how to give and receive love. We began on that very first Sunday in 2013, September 13th, I think. Talking about the title talk, I didn't even look it up, I just remember it, Prove Me Now. And it was to prove that love is the absolute reality of all life. And you guys prove it to us, and we hope we give back to you that same proof that love is all that there is. And And that this love is not just within this community, but this love has no walls, that as we experience this explosive love for each other, we feel it for the community, we feel it for our planet. Every one of us is needed here and now. Thank you for being the healers. Thank you for being willing to receive and healing in your life. And let's just pray. Let's just pray. One power, one presence. Behind all appearances, one power, one presence. It is always whole, perfect, and complete. One power, one presence. One power, one presence. Behind all appearances, behind all the world of relativity, the ever-changing presence, behind all emotions, behind everything that is this human, beautiful human world entails, behind all of it is this extraordinary, mind-boggling beauty, awe-inspiring grace, light, joy, freedom, bliss, love, and that it is whole. It is not missing anything. There is nothing lacking, and there's nothing we could ever add onto it. It is all right here in this moment. It's divine perfection, as each and every one of us is this wholeness, is this beautiful expression of the divine that has created itself into form. And so we hold this wholeness for ourselves first, foremost, and always. Whatever areas of healing that we are opening to, we go to that one power, that one presence, and we open our heart and we say yes to that always already wholeness, that always already perfect wholeness now. And as we hold and know this truth about our life, we hold this truth for those people in our life who are asking for prayer. Many of us receive so many prayer requests. We hold all those prayers. One power, one presence. One power, one presence. We don't need to know the details. We need to know the divine presence, the one power, the one presence, the wholeness and the perfection behind it all. We don't need to parcel it out with our minds. We just know the one power, the one presence, the one love, the one wholeness. We keep it simple, and it is the essence and source of all life. And collectively, I invite us to hold two of our most beautiful and precious community members, Jerry Bowen in her continued healing, and Jack Quigley in his healing, and revealing that that wholeness is showing up perfectly and exactly for each of their highest good right here and right now. We trust this wholeness that has it all taken care of already, right in this moment. We cannot add on to it. We cannot take it. It's already done perfectly, as Jerry Bowen, as Jack Quigley, and as the Lighthouse Spiritual Center. For all of this good, and more than words could ever possibly say, we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, God. We release it now into the action of the law, knowing it is done. In divine peace, we let it be, as we say together, and so it is. Amen.
I walk in God.